Welcome to the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Welcome to ITSP Magazine Podcast Radio. You're about to listen to an episode of Tech Done Different podcast with Ted Harrington. Do you follow the pack or challenge the status quo? Join Ted as he explores how to succeed by going against conventional wisdom. You'll hear leaders in technology and security tell stories about how they achieve their success by doing things differently. Knowledge is power. Now, more than ever.
CrowdSec, the collaborative and open source cybersecurity solution. Analyze behaviors, respond to attacks, and share signals across the community for free. Let's make the internet safer together. Learn more at crowdsec.net.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Tech Done Different. As always, I'm your host, Ted Harrington, and with me today is our very special guest, Josh Linkner. Josh, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, man. Good to be with you.
I was asking Josh before what title he'd like to go by because he is a man of many skills and accomplishments, New York Times bestselling author, a keynote speaker that's just an incredible mind and has so many interesting insights. And you describe yourself as creative troublemaker. So I'm curious as to that. Tell me about being a creative troublemaker. What does that mean?
Yeah, that's my proud title, creative troublemaker. And I say that because, first of all, I deeply value human creativity. I started my career as a jazz guitarist. I've launched 5 tech companies of my own and helped about 100 other startups get off the ground. And I've now written several books on this topic of creativity. And to me, it's just like the life force. It's the one thing that separates us from automation. It's the one thing that's going to allow us to excel with either in our businesses or even in our communities. And so that's the creative part. And the troublemaking part, I obviously don't like to make bad things happen, quite the opposite, but I do like to be provocative and challenge conventional wisdom and sort of stick my finger in the eye of traditional thinking. So I do like to kind of poke the bear a bit again, in a productive way, not in a mean-spirited way.
Sure. Well, the title, it really resonates, with me, certainly being a security guy and, coming from ethical hacking. That's, I don't know about necessarily. Yeah, it probably resonates exactly what you're saying. We're not necessarily trying to create trouble, but we are trying to say, hey, it's not X, it's Y, and trying to help people think differently and view differently. I mean, that's what this whole show's about. So how should people do that? How should people, you said you poke the bear a little bit. How should people think differently when it comes to creativity?
So we were just chatting earlier. I just came out with my newest book, Big Little Breakthroughs, How Small Everyday Innovations Drive Oversized Results. And the whole point of the book is to help everyday people become everyday innovators. And anyway, in the research, so I spent over 1,000 hours researching CEOs, billionaires, celebrity entrepreneurs. I interviewed people all over the world, academic research and neuroscience research. But the whole goal was to demystify the creative process. And what it really comes to prove is that we are all creative. Like that's an innate ability that all of us can cultivate and develop skills around. And so to answer your question, a little bit more complicated than just like here's a hack, but it's more about resetting your mindset, your habits, and your tactics. And when you do that, you can actually unleash incredible creative ability. All of us can. And by the way, it might show up differently. I play jazz guitar pretty well. I can't draw a stick figure if I tried. So people listening today, your creative ability might not be in a classic sense, like painting on canvas, but it might be in a sense like developing better security measures to thwart intrusion or interacting with colleagues or hiring or building a great team. So again, we can all be creative in our own ways. And that's what I really tried to do in the book, is give people a specific approach on exactly how to do it.
So let me ask you about, you mentioned those, it sounded like there were maybe 3 pillars to this. Let me ask you about mindset first. Because one of the things that I've noticed across tech in general, security in particular, is that there's commonly this, trend where what we want to do is we want to say, give me the list of things to do, and I'm going to go do the list of things. But we sort of jump over how should we even be thinking about this first? What's our right mindset? So how should we be thinking about mindset in your view?
Well, I think the first recognition that we have to do is dispel a couple myths. I mean, first of all, again, many people think that only some people are born creative and the others are not. And the research is so clear that as human beings, we're hardwired to be creative. That's our natural state. And so first is a recognition that we all can do this. It's a skill. It's not a God-given talent. The second thing is that people often think that creativity only counts or innovation only counts if it's a billion-dollar idea or if it changes the world. But in the book that I have, Big Little Breakthroughs, it's all about cultivating small, everyday innovations, these little micro innovations, which reduces the risk, makes it much more accessible to us all. People often think that it only applies to certain roles. And the truth is that I think it's the core responsibility of us all to bring our inventive thinking and creative problem solving to the game. Those that are trying to, damage our networks and hack into our fortresses are certainly being creative, which means that we have to be, one step ahead creatively. So once some of those basic myths have been dispelled, Ted, in the back half of the book, I cover the 8 core obsessions of everyday innovators. This is the commonality or the patterns that I've observed, both personally and through a ton of research over the last 20 years on how creative people think. And I'd be happy to share one or more or all of those with you if you'd like.
Yeah, I definitely want to get into those, but I first want to ask you about this idea that you just mentioned of micro innovation. So what's an example of a micro innovation? Is that something like changing your daily routine, or is it even more micro than that? And what's the difference between a micro innovation versus whatever the opposite of a macro innovation?
Yeah, so I sort of define innovations in 3 flavors. Innovation in all capital letters. Think of that as the stuff that you normally think of it as innovation. Inventing penicillin, the internet, movable type, And so these are the ones that change history, but they're pretty few and far between. I mean, they're awesome and they get all the attention, but something doesn't have to do that to be an innovation. So one double click on that word, you just have a capital I and the rest of the letters in lowercase. That is a kind of capital I innovation. Those are the 3 or 4 ideas that any one of us can land on in a given year. They don't maybe make the cover of a magazine, but they're kind of meaty. So maybe you invent a new technology service that significantly boosts the security of a network. That would be awesome. Again, maybe it's not equivalent to the assembly line, but it's still pretty darn juicy. And that could be a process innovation, a product innovation, a tech innovation, a people innovation, and any area of business or life. But the ones I really like are the often neglected, all lowercase innovation. And I call them big little breakthroughs. And these are the small little adjustments that, funny enough, don't get enough attention, but Harvard released a study showing that 77% of the United States gross domestic product doesn't come from the sexy attention-grabbing big innovations. It comes from the little everyday stuff. And this could be a little adjustment: how you run your Monday morning meeting, how you send an email, how you give a presentation, how you write a line of code. And these are these small things that might not seem all that enormous, but here's what happens. First of all, you don't have to be wearing a lab coat or a hoodie. Small, big, little breakthroughs, they're accessible to us all. Second of all, they're way less risky. The biggest reason most people cite for not being innovative is that they're too afraid to fail or look foolish. But if you're testing lots of these little small things, you know full well they're not all going to work out, but it doesn't really matter because you didn't burn the building down if you wasted $20. And the other thing that's kind of cool is that besides that they add up to big things over time, they're also developing skill. I started my career playing jazz music, and the way you learn to play an instrument isn't like you have one killer lesson and that's the end of it. It's that you build skill through day in and day out practice, and cultivating high volumes of big little breakthroughs do just that. So what I've done is sort of inverted the whole way we think about innovation into a much more pragmatic approach that we normal people can deploy on a daily basis.
That's really fascinating. And one of the things that seems to be coming through what I'm hearing you say is removing barriers for people to feel like they themselves can innovate, right? Because if it's all caps, the all caps innovation, people maybe are daunted by that and like, oh, I'm not going to invent the next penicillin. But it sounds like what you're saying is these micro innovations are things that everyone can do every day that meaningfully make contribution. Is that correct?
You are exactly right. And think about like the scales, like a scale, old scale of justice kind of thing. Normally the way it works is this: we view standing still, doing nothing as really safe. And we view trying something new and being creative as really risky. Therefore we do nothing. And I recommend that first of all, we shine a bright flashlight on the real risk of doing nothing. There's an old saying, if you don't like change, you're going to like irrelevance even less. And I don't think that's a luxury that we can afford. I mean, in other words, it gives us a false sense of security. How'd that work out for Pan Am Airlines? How's Oldsmobile doing these days? So I think there's a real risk of standing still. And then the trick is, how do you de-risk trying something new? And that's by taking small, high velocity experiments rather than swing for the fences, high risk endeavors. But maybe I'll just also, I'd love to, if I may, just give you an example of what I mean by a big little breakthrough. Yeah. So there's this guy who I interviewed for the book. His name is Trewin Restorick. And you've never heard of him because I'd never heard of him. And he's not Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg. He's like a normal dude. He doesn't wear a $4,000 suit. He wears wrinkly khaki pants and 15-year-old loafers. But Trewin was stuck on a problem. And the problem is cigarette butt litter in central London. He's from London, and it turns out that cigarette litter on the ground is a terrible problem. It's the worst environmental hazard in London, costs millions of dollars a year to try to fix, doesn't really work, bad for the environment, bad for small animals that ingest them, just bad all around. But all these people have tried things, and again, nothing has really worked. So again, enter our friend Trewin, who cared about the environment, but he didn't have a military grade, titanium level equipment to do. He was like a normal dude. But here's what he does. He invents something, a big little breakthrough called the ballot bin. So the ballot bin, Ted, is, imagine you and I were in a London pub. We just had a pint and some fish and chips, and we walk outside. We're about to throw our cigarette butts on the ground. But then up ahead, you see this bright yellow metal box. You're sort of drawn to it. And the front of the box is a piece of glass. There's a divider going down the middle. And at the top is a two-part question, such as, which is your favorite food? Pizza or hamburgers? And then there's a little receptacle encouraging smokers to vote with their butts. So I like pizza. So I'd put my cigarette butt in the thing of pizza. It falls on top of the other cigarette butts. It's almost like two bar charts that are right in front of me. And it was low tech, and it didn't require, regulatory approval. He didn't have to have 15 PhDs. And here's the cool part. It really worked. In fact, when these ballot bins are installed, they reduce cigarette litter by 80%. And so this guy, Trewin, has went on to start a 50-person company. They're in 27 countries with ballot bins. He's making a real difference in the world. And the reason I just wanted to share that is that, when I look at Elon Musk, it's hard to see ourselves in that. We say good for him, but I could never do that. When I see Picasso or Henry Ford, like, how do you relate to that? But Trewin Restrick, we can all relate to. Any one of us could see that, like, you know what? I could have come up with that. And the whole goal here is to make human creativity accessible, trying to democratize this and make sure that it's within the grasp of every one of us here today.
That's such a fascinating story. I had not heard that name, but I have seen on social media those ballot box, the butt box, whatever it was called. I've seen those all over the place because they're visual too, right? They're worthy of sharing, which is in itself a really interesting part of the innovation. Like, how do you make the idea contagious so that people want to share it with others?
Totally. And by the way, to pick any challenge, grab a newspaper, in social and racial injustice in the United States. So if I was like, hey, Ted, can you just solve that real quick with one idea? I mean, are you kidding me? It's so overwhelming. But if I said to you, hey, let's just do a rapid fire session for 5 minutes and see how many small ideas we could come up with that may not solve the entire problem, but might be helpful. Then all of a sudden, you'll instead of freezing, you'll just start riffing on ideas. So when we take small at bats, it's so much more easy to go after them.
I love it.
By the way, real quickly, these can apply in your personal life. So if people send me stuff all the time. If anyone listening today has a big little breakthrough, send me. I love collecting them. But someone the other day was just telling me, like, how do you cool off a glass of white wine? You can't put an ice cube in it because it dilutes the flavor. You don't want to stick it in the freezer, waits too long. So the answer is frozen grapes. Drop a frozen grape in your white wine, cools off the wine, doesn't dilute the flavor. So these are the cool little tricks that you can use in any area of life, whether it's your profession or your personal life.
I need to go get a glass of wine now and drop some frozen grapes in it.
Amen to that.
So tell me about these principles, these 8 concepts that you mentioned you've sort of put some thought into. I'd love to walk through them.
Yeah, happy to. And if anyone is curious and don't feel like taking notes, or if you're on the run, these are all available. They're free just at biglittlebreakthroughs.com. But there's, again, I've observed that there are these 8 common mindsets or patterns of the most innovative people and organizations. And I'll walk you through as many as you want. But one of them is called start before you're ready, which is this. Most of us wait. We wait for permission or a directive from the boss, or till our game plan is bulletproof. But when we wait, we miss an opportunity altogether. And so innovators instead, they sort of jump in knowing full well they don't have all the answers, knowing full well that their first attempts are going to be messy, and they're willing to go after it and pivot and adapt and course correct along the way. So it's moving forward with agility and an open-mindedness rather than waiting till you have ideal conditions, because let's face it, most often there's never going to be ideal conditions. Another one, just as we're riffing on it, which is actually fairly common in technology circles, it's fall in love with the problem, not the solution. And many times, let's say we're solution focused and we're trying to, patch a security hole in a network, and we see the problem. We want to get up a solution, so we grab the first one, and then we become tunnel visioned around it. And so a more productive approach would be to really fall in love with the problem and be really willing to solve it in any manner and be willing to let go of one potential solution in favor of a better one. So innovators tend to sort of bathe in the problem. They study it from 360. They look at it in multiple lenses. They ask constant questions about the problem. And even if one solution is doing okay now, they're still always craving a better solution. So they're married to the problem itself and solving it rather than a particular way of doing so.
Yeah, both of those already, and you've only there's more to go. But even just the two, you already have the wheels turning. And this first one, you mentioned this idea of start before you're ready. I think that applies even. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like that applies to people's professional advancement and career choices as well. Because one of the things that I hear all the time is it seems like people feel that they have to check every single box of qualifications in order to be able to change career, move into a new industry, get that job, get a promotion, apply to their company. And people ask me for advice on that all the time. And they're like, they'll list out like, oh, I have all these things, think I'm ready. I'm like, I'm not going to read your list. Do it. Just try. Like, let them reject you, not you reject you.
100% correct. And actually that principle couples really well with another principle called open a test kitchen. And you probably know this, but food companies and restaurants, they often have a designated test kitchen, which is that they don't test out new food items on a busy Saturday night. They, in a separate, safe place, they're constantly running little experiments before then perfecting their dishes. And one of the reasons people don't start before they're ready is they think that when they start, it's got to be perfect. But the concept of open a test kitchen is embracing the spirit of rapid experimentation. Instead of trying some big idea and rolling it out globally, the question is how quick and fast and cheap can you test it? So instead of saying I'm taking a $10 million bet, I want to say, how can you test it in 15 minutes for $5? Because if it doesn't work, then you're okay. And by the way, the optimal number of failed experiments in an organization is not 0. If you have 0 failed experiments, it means you're not pushing hard enough. And companies like Google and Microsoft have 40, 50, 60% failed experiments, and they still, of course, achieve greatly. And so the notion here, probably best describe these two together. One of the subjects that I interviewed in the book is a guy named Matt Ishbia. Matt is the CEO of the largest wholesale mortgage company in the world. They are the back end for all these independent mortgage companies. Company's now public. My buddy Matt Ishbia is now worth about $13 billion. But Matt told me, by the way, he's 40. So like, how cool is that?
Yeah.
Totally self-made. But Matt told me, he said, look, let's look at it this way. Let's say you and I both see an opportunity. And let's say we don't really have all the answers. And let's say, he goes, you're smarter than me. He's all humble. Let's say you're smarter than me and I'm a little dumber, but I'm going to get started now, but you're going to wait till you have it perfect. And so here's what happens. Let's say you wait 6 months to start, but I start right now. My first idea is going to stink. And my second one's going to be pretty bad. And my third one, but I'm going to get all these cycles and I'm going to keep working on it. So by the time you launch version number 1, I've already had 100 trials to sand off the rough edges and get it right. He goes, and he's being humble. He's like, even though I'm way not as smart as you, I will be further along because I started before I was ready and tested and tweaked and tested and tweaked. And I think that's really just the way to roll.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, there's so much power in that because if you're starting something with the anticipation that it won't be right and it might fail, well, you've already removed the worst case scenario. Like people don't start because they're worried about failing. You're like, yeah, I know I'm going to fail. That's why I'm doing it.
That's exactly right. And we do the opposite. We say, I can't even start until it's perfect, which is why so many of us never start. So a couple of these other mindsets, and the cool thing is they're portable. They don't require years of study or millions of dollars of investment. And in each of these chapters, I give all kinds of examples and stories and techniques and such. But the next one on our little list here, and most of these are counterintuitive. They're giving you advice that's the opposite of what you've been told your whole life. The next one is called break it to fix it. We've all heard the advice, hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Man, that is terrible advice. Why in the world would you wait till a system or a process has failed? Like that would be like saying, yeah, I'm not going to try upgrading my security until I have a breach. I mean, like it's idiotic, but that's what we've been told our whole lives. So the principle here is the opposite. It's saying, okay, let's examine our systems, processes, products, approaches, and proactively deconstruct them, examine the requisite components and find ways to rebuild them better. It's sort of in a series of constant forced upgrades, forced obsolescence of previous versions. You're putting the old version out of business. Yeah. A couple other ones go ahead.
Yeah. No, keep going. Keep going.
Yeah. So the next one up on our little list here is kind of fun. This one says, use every drop of toothpaste. Use every drop of toothpaste is the notion of being scrappy and resourceful, making do with whatever items you have rather than requiring more external resources. And I have the opportunity to work with organizations around the globe, from the biggest to the smallest. And the objection I often hear, because they want to be more innovative, they're like, I'd love that, but I'm missing something. I don't have enough. And then I'm like, okay, wait for it. And there's always a fill in the blank. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough time. I don't have enough bandwidth. I don't have enough computing power. But I always playfully respond saying, if the amount of external resources you had equaled your level of creativity, the federal government would be the most creative organization on the planet, and startups would be the least. And of course, we know the exact opposite is true. So this is around being kind of scrappy and resourceful, using your ingenuity and doubling down on internal resources rather than reaching for external ones. It reminded me of a quick story. I put myself through college playing music. And I had a professor, I studied music, that would force me to remove strings from my guitar. I played jazz guitar. And so I was now having to take off 1, 2, sometimes 3 strings from the instrument. And so on the surface, you'd figure, man, if your resources are cut in half, your creativity is going to tank. But this surprising and counterintuitive thing happened when those strings were off and I could no longer rely on the patterns that I knew. I was forced to solve musical problems in a fresh way. And so actually my creativity skyrocketed. And so again, I know it's counterintuitive, but the notion of making do and maximizing the resources at hand is a hallmark of innovators.
That's really fascinating. There's something I'm going through right now. I'm experimenting with TikTok as a platform, as a way to share ideas. And you're so constrained on TikTok, maximum 60 seconds, but really it should be more like 15 seconds. You need to catch their attention right away. You really have like 1 second. It's kind of like one of the things you've taught me, you have to earn someone's attention like 15 seconds at a time. And as I've been going through that, it's made me be able to convey ideas in other platforms better, because it's like, well, now I have to do it in 60 seconds, 30 seconds, 15 seconds. And it's the constraint that made me be able to do that. It's not despite the constraint, it's because of the constraint.
That's exactly right. I mean, there's the classic case of this when in the 1960s, the president of Random House Publishing bet a young children's author $100. Said, if you can write a children's book that's successful using only 50 words of the English language. And that publisher lost his bet to Dr. Seuss, who came up with Green Eggs and Ham, which became one of the all-time successes and really launched Dr. Seuss's career and his whole style. And the question is, would the book have been as good if he had access to every single word?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Forcing you to think differently within given constraints. And that's
Right.
really interesting, because that this problem definitely exists in security. I have to imagine it exists in pretty much every other domain as well. But this idea of we just don't have enough people, we don't have enough money, we don't have enough time. I mean, the list that you rattled off is like, yep, that's security right there. So let's say, what should I say to the chief information security officer out there who is trying to advocate to get more budget or more people to hire or more tools or whatever? This idea of use every last drop of toothpaste, is it look at the people you already have and unlock capabilities that maybe we haven't tapped yet? Is it, what is the advice, I guess, in a practical sense?
Well, in the practical sense, most of us, probably me included, have dormant reservoirs of creative capacity. And my humble belief is that all 7 billion people on the planet have creative capacity that could be unleashed. And the way I would phrase that is like, imagine if you owned a company and someone told you, hey, like out back on your property, turns out we hit oil and there's $1 billion of oil underneath the ground. Would you be like, yeah, I'm just gonna leave it alone. I'm not going to tap into that. That'd be crazy. But I would argue, again, with great respect, that most of our organizations are just like that, because we have this free, renewable, incredible, super powerful resource locked inside of our people, and we don't let them express it. And so if you have a 100-person company and only 4 people get to be creative and the rest of us are just heads down doing what they're told, we're really missing it. That's like not tapping the oil well. And so I think that as leaders, sometimes we don't need the next gadget. What we need is to unlock the creative capacity of our team. And I believe that's really one of the most important jobs for a leader, is to create the ideal conditions to unleash the creative capacity of those we serve. And when we do that, often the external resource needs kind of melt away, because the resource you've been looking for, you might have all along.
So you mentioned that in many organizations that we're not allowing people to be creative in the ways that you're advocating for. What are the things that are causing that? I mean, are leaders literally not allowing their, like saying, no, your job is not to be creative, or is it maybe something we're not realizing that we're doing?
It's more the latter than the former. I mean, certainly I'm sure there are some total jerks out there that say that, but probably what happens more often than not is that there's a conflict, and the conflict is what leaders say and how they behave. And so you see people all the time, oh, we love innovation. That's our thing, but then when someone shows up with a bad idea, they're sent to corporate timeout. Or it's like, hey, you have 5 minutes, but whatever you do, don't give me a bad idea. And so here's the problem. Fear, not natural talent. Fear is the single biggest blocker of creative output. Simply put, fear and creativity cannot coexist. So even unwittingly, if leaders are creating an environment that is anything other than a safe environment for people to share the good, the bad, and the ugly, you eradicate the creativity. The way to solve it is by creating rituals and rewards that support the creative process. Back to our friend Trewin Restorick, the guy with the ballot bins in London. I was asking him the same question. I was like, hey, how do you keep your team staying really creative, now that you've achieved some success? And he has a great ritual. Every Friday, they have F Up Fridays. They say the whole word. I'll be PG today, but F Up Fridays go like this. They have a big brown bag lunch for the entire company. And they go around the room. Each person stands up and proudly shares what they F'd up that week and what they learned from it. And when they get to somebody that didn't F something up that week, everyone's like, well, why not? What are you going to try next week? And just pause for a minute. Think about the message that drives deep into the DNA of this organization, about the importance of taking responsible risks, about a willingness to accept stumbles on the journey to greatness. That artistry and creativity is every single person's job. So a simple ritual and reward system can break through the muck and help people bring that creativity to the surface.
So how can we balance the sometimes overwhelming nature of the creative process versus the need to actually execute our daily roles? And what I mean by that is, one of the things I've observed in our organization, I've seen it happen in others as well, is that sometimes when there's tons of ideas being generated, it almost creates like a gridlock, because it's like, okay, well, these ideas sound great, but I also have this other stuff I need to do. So where should I allocate my attention? How do we resolve that conflict?
That's an excellent question. And the way I look at it is this. Ted, you're a very young guy. I don't know if you have a retirement savings or not yet, but let's just say you did. My hunch would be you wouldn't put it all in one stock. You might have a few different asset classes. Some is really safe, some is medium safe, some is international, and maybe a little bit is carved out for a little bit more risky. That would be a balanced portfolio approach and the standard, 101 investment theory. So I think that's exactly the approach we should take as leaders. And so here's what I mean. Most of the time, most professionals spend their entire week being what I would call heads down. And when you're heads down, what are you doing? You're doing the transactional work. You're cranking out your to-do list. You're getting the job done. But let's think about this just visually. When you're heads down, you're not heads up. And when you're heads up, you notice stuff. And that's when you connect the dots. That's when you're thinking creatively and strategically. That's when you're using inventive thinking and creative problem solving, and sort of not just dealing with the tactical work of the moment, but you're looking beyond. And so my suggestion for people is, don't just ditch your to-do list and fall short on your expectations. Of course not. Back to that balanced portfolio. And I think a great way to start with a 5% challenge. Here's what I mean. 5% of a 40-hour work week is 2 hours. Give yourself an experiment time. Let's say 30 days. Say for the next 30 days, I'm going to schedule on my calendar. It doesn't have to be all contiguous, but I'm going to find 2 hours a week. It could be 4 30-minute sprints, whatever. And instead of being heads down, I'm going to be heads up. And I'm going to schedule it like an important meeting that can't be broken. Anyway, Ted, I've issued this challenge all over the world. And here's what I hear back every time. First thing I hear back is a 0% drop in productivity. 0. Magically, 40 hours get smushed into 38 hours. No one misses a beat. The next thing I hear back, they say, that first week, it was so awkward. I felt like I was cheating on my spouse or something, like I was frivolous. Like, why aren't I doing something? What if the boss sees me? But here's the cool part. By the end of that 30-day period, people say that became the most productive time of my week, the most productive time I've had in 10 years. And so my suggestion isn't an all or nothing thing. I'm not saying people should run down the hall and draw on the walls with purple crayons and ignore their responsibilities, but just carve out a little bit of time in a deliberate, thoughtful, pragmatic manner invest and see what happens if you let your imagination come out a little bit. And I've issued this challenge, and some people have done this really begrudgingly, like, this is so much BS. I'm not going to do this. And I get notes from people like, hey man, it's day 90 and I'm never stopping this again because I'm a whole new person. I'm deeply rewarded. I feel I'm getting ahead of my career. My impact is bigger. I feel better. So I'd say, run the experiment.
Yeah. Well, it is in my many notes that I've been taking here today. I'm going to go implement that idea. I love it. I'm a big believer in time blocking. So I already have the structure to go do it. Now I just got to go implement it.
That's
okay,
awesome.
So I think we've covered maybe like 6 of the principles. Are there any that we haven't talked about yet?
Yeah, there's 2 that I'll just share briefly. One of them is called Don't Forget the Dinner Mint.
Okay. So
I'm sure you've gone to a nice restaurant, and at the end of your meal, the server comes up and says, "Oh, here, Mr. Harrington, here's a little something from compliments of the chef." And if you ordered it on your own, it would be good and all, but the fact that it was surprise and delight, it exceeded your expectations. It completely transformed the whole meal for you. And if you think about the actual cost of that little something they gave you compared to their overall cost structure, facilities, marketing, staff, insurance, blah, 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 like it was negligible, but proportionally, it made a huge impact for you. That is the exact same theory here. And here's the thing: whether we're delivering to an internal customer, like an employee or a team member, or an external one, we are just delivering on expectations. That's the ante to play. Like as customers, we expect good service. We expect competence. We expect timely delivery. We expect decent product price mix, but where we really win is what do we do to plus it up? And so the dinner mint strategy is, before you ship any piece of work, whether it's as simple as sending an email or it's giving a presentation or you're designing a new product offering, yeah, of course you should deliver with excellence and meet expectations. But once you've got that, you say, all right, what's a dinner mint that I could add? What's 2% or 1% or 0.5%? What's a little extra creative flourish that you could add that is unexpected, that makes your delivery transcendent? And we cover many fun examples in the book, but the littlest dose of something extra can go such a long way. One that comes to mind: there's a hotel in Orlando, Florida, called the Magic Castle. It's like a knockoff. It's not owned by Disney. It's sort of a lower end hotel, just like dozens and dozens of others. Everything is identical to their competition, by the way. Like the rooms are the same, the location's the same, the price point's the same, the beds are the same. Like it's completely dime a dozen, except for one thing: they have a dinner mint strategy. The dinner mint is this: when you're at their pool, and mounted on the wall, there's a bright red phone, a kind of reminiscent of like the bat phone. And you walk up, there's no even dials on it. You just pick it up, and you hear on the other end, someone says, "What flavor?" And you say, "Grape." And within minutes, someone shows up with literally a silver platter wearing white gloves and delivers you a grape popsicle. In other words, that is a popsicle hotline. That's it. Free popsicles. Use the phone to get a popsicle. And it's fun. And it's like this whole experience. Meanwhile, everything else is the same. But guess which hotel beats the others consistently? Guess which hotel has 10 times the number of Yelp reviews? Guess which hotel is never empty, even in a pandemic? So again, that little dinner mint strategy, the cost of doing that compared to their rooms and their real estate costs, negligible. But that extra little something made them stand out from the competitive pack. And I think that we can apply the same thing, even if we're writing a security patch. Like, what's the little something extra that you can add, whether it's a little extra time savings or a little flourish or a little extra something that can really elevate your offering to otherworldly.
Yeah. Wow. That's powerful stuff. I have to think about what is our popsicle that we can deliver, but that's such a great idea. I can totally see it. So what's the final one then?
The final one is an important one. This one is called fall 7 times, stand 8. Okay. I borrowed the exact phrase from a Zen proverb, but here's the way I interpret it. First of all, it's a recognition that the part of the process of innovation is stumbling or failing or making a mistake. When they invented the COVID vaccine, thank God, it wasn't like some guy in a corner office like, I've got an idea. It's going to be perfect. Go print 1 billion doses. They would call security. They'd arrest that person for saying that. Right. Instead, what happened? In a laboratory, they ran a bunch of experiments. Many of them didn't work out. probably most of them didn't, but they found ones that sort of worked, and then they continued to, didn't work again, but they kept at it. And over time, with each little pivot, they eventually got to the goal line. And that's really so again, fall 7 times, stand 8 is a recognition that mistakes and setbacks are part of the process. In other words, if we're not stumbling a little here and there, we're not trying hard enough. And so what we need to do, first of all, is extend compassion to ourselves. When a friend of ours screws something up, well-intentioned, we give them a hug. But when we screw something up ourselves, we think we're total morons, and we're ashamed, and we feel awful, and we eviscerate ourselves. And so it's like, we got to give ourselves a little breathing room, that it's going to take some bad ideas to get to the good ones. And then secondly, it's not just dogged persistence. It's not just repeating a failed experiment, hoping for something new, but it's rather saying, okay, this didn't work. What does the data tell me? And on my next attempt, how can I be a little bit different? So in other words, it's the fusion of creativity and resilience, this fall 7 times, stand 8 mentality. You have the inevitable setback. What can I learn from it? How can I dust myself off? How can I get back in the fight with a slightly different approach? And over time, with enough of those adjustments, you just keep getting back after it. And that's ultimately how innovation is unleashed.
Oh, I love it. So is innovation itself something that innovates? Like, does innovation change over time, or are the principles of innovation consistent and static?
I think the way I define innovation is sort of deployment of human creativity, and that you unlock some utility value. So I don't know if the definition of that changes, but absolutely the way you get there changes. It's funny, man, I've been riffing on this recently. So what technique do you use? If I said, all right, let's sit down, we got to come up with some ideas, what do you likely do?
Walk in front of the whiteboard.
Go ahead. And you say you're going to hold what kind of session is it? What do you call it?
Yeah, like a brainstorming session, bring people together. Brainstorming session.
Yeah. Right. So brainstorming is the ubiquitous technique. I call it a technology for unlocking ideas. But here's the thing. Brainstorming was invented in 1958. A lot of things have changed since 1958. And brainstorming to me is wildly ineffective, out-of-date technology that needs to be upgraded. I mean, if you want to yield mediocre ideas, do brainstorming, but there's so many better approaches. So in the book, I cover a whole suite that I've developed over the last 20 years of upgraded technologies, better technology, better technique. So here, I'll give you an example. One of them that I use, very, very effective, is called role storming. Role storming is like brainstorming, but you're doing it in character. In other words, you're doing it as if you are somebody else. Problem is, when you do a brainstorm session and you have a crazy idea, we tend to hold them back because we don't want to look foolish. We don't want to offend the boss, or what if the idea doesn't work? And what does that mean for my career? So by definition, because we're individually responsible for any idea we share, which immediately invites scrutiny, we share our safe ideas and hold our big ideas back. Role storming fixes that. So Ted, let's say we were doing this together and you were playing the role of Steve Jobs. No one's going to laugh at you for coming up with a big idea. They might laugh at you for coming up with a small one. Mm-hmm. So now Ted, AKA Steve, totally liberated. You can say anything you want, zero fear whatsoever. And so the technique is actually really simple. You got people in the room. Each person picks any character they want to be. One person could be a sports hero. Someone could be a movie star. Someone could be a supermodel. Someone could be an alien. Someone could be a 4-year-old. Someone could be someone from the future or a different country. But the idea is you stay in character and brainstorm an actual real world problem, but you're role storming as if you are somebody else. And I'll tell you real quick, I did this with a group of executives one time at Sony Japan. I met this guy. He was like the stiffest human being I've ever met. Dark suit, white shirt, ties up to, choking him. Anyway, we got this guy role storming as Yoda.
Okay.
I've never seen personal transformation like this. This dude's jacket's off, his tie's undone. He's like leaping around the room. And the whiteboards were filled with ideas. I didn't teach him to be creative. He had that inside all along. But the role he was in forbid it. We put him in a new role and he was able to be extraordinarily creative very quickly. So that's just one example. I actually covered 13 techniques like that are way more fun, but way more effective. But if we want to get the ideas that are inside all of us right now, how do we get them to the surface? We got to use better technology.
What an interesting and exciting note for us to end on as our time's coming up to the end here. But, we talked earlier about how can we be more creative because of constraints. And it sounds like what you just introduced was, and now here's how we break out of the barriers that keep us in the boxes that we're currently contained within. Is that the way the ideas work together?
Yeah, in that particular exercise, yes. And you choose different exercises depending on what you're trying to accomplish. But yeah, that's a really good way to come up with expansive ideas, because by definition, you are removing the fear. You're absolving yourself of responsibility, because it's not you coming up with the idea. It's Hemingway or Kim Kardashian or Darth Vader or whomever you want to be.
I love it. Well, Josh, I'm so grateful to have you in my life, and always, every time I talk to you, man, I learn so much, and you help me think about things new way. And I'm so grateful for the way you've served our audience today. So thank you for your time. Is there any parting wisdom or last words you want to leave our audience with?
Well, thank you, Ted. I really appreciate always chatting with you, and I'm a big fan of yours. I just want to reinforce that all human beings are creative. We all can develop this skill, and with the right techniques and mindsets and a little bit of change to habits, it doesn't take a lot of effort. It doesn't take years of study or a bunch of money, but we can significantly plus up the outcomes that we care about most in our lives, whether it's a business outcome or a security outcome, or even a community or family outcome. And I would just say as an asset, check out biglittlebreakthroughs.com. Yes, you can buy the book, but even if you don't want to buy the book, there is a whole set of free resources there. There's a free creativity assessment tool. There's a quick start guide. There's downloadable worksheets that cover many of the techniques. And so again, if it's helpful to you as listener, check it out, biglittlebreakthroughs.com. And it's just kind of a nice toolkit for you to have as you begin on your own path of amping up your own creativity.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for spending some time with us here today. And thank everyone for tuning in. If you want to learn more about what Josh is up to, or to request to appear on the show yourself, just head to tedharrington.com/podcast, and we'll catch you next time.
CrowdSec, the collaborative and open source cybersecurity solution. Analyze behaviors, respond to attacks, and share signals across the community for free. Let's make the internet safer together. Learn more at crowdsec.net.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Tech Done Different podcast with Ted Harrington. If you learned something new and this conversation made you think, then share itspmagazine.com with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to associate your brand with our conversations, sponsor one or more of our podcast channels. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey. You can always find us at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society.